Hello, everyone. Welcome to the unofficial Unreal Engine podcast, where we talk about Unreal Engine and lots of butter. We're your hosts. My name's Alex.
My name's Jacob, and today we're really just catching up. We have a ton of stuff. Alex and I have really we've purposely not recapped any of it, honestly, just for the content. But we had a few eventful weeks here. Alex, do you want to kind of sum that up?
Yeah, I mean, we're both wearing the same shirt right now from UnrealFest. We actually did not see a lot of each other during UnrealFest. Yeah. The original goal was like, we're going to have a bunch of interviews and we're going to sit down with a ton of people. And it was such a busy 4 days, whatever it was, that really we were on totally different paths. So part of what we're going to do today is recap that. Also, I was in Korea for a week, and I'm sure Jacob's been doing exciting things during that as well. I have a MetaQuest Pro now.
Oh, yeah, I want to talk about that for sure.
RTX 4090, and there's all sorts of things to talk about. So this is going to be kind of a free-for-all, just, what we're excited to talk about. The whole goal of the podcast originally was, hey, Jacob, I'm really excited about this thing. Can we talk about it? And Jacob saying like, yeah, let's do that and also record it. So here we are.
Exactly. Yeah, I think, the first thing to talk about, of course, is, felt like kicked it all off was UnrealFest. That was an awesome event. It was in New Orleans for those who didn't hear about it or maybe have watched some of the sessions online. It was my first time in New Orleans.
Me too.
And so that was an experience in itself. I felt like I got out and tried to see as much as I can, ate lots of butter, which is, the segue we chose for this episode. But it was super eventful. It was 4 days, right? Like we were there for about 4 days.
Yeah, and I have to say thank you, Jacob, for taking care of me from the airport. I was on the phone with a client, like trying to gather my bags, and he like got me into a vehicle with all my stuff.
Like,
I had two big giant
an Escalade pulled up. I just stuffed him in it, tossed him and all his VR gear, just strained the car.
Yeah, so we got in early Monday morning. Monday was just kind of like a registration day, and then it was like 3 jam-packed days of sessions and events and stuff around New Orleans. So it was a blast.
Yeah, it really was. And it kicked off the first day, and it was like 8 or 9 p.m. And we had like a registration event, with some drinks or whatever. And I think at that event, I ran into more people than I have since COVID started. It was just a ton of people who either I had only seen online, like only met online, or I had seen them at an Unreal event, prior to COVID, and it just hadn't seen them since. So that was just really awesome, honestly. I had a great time that first night, just catching up with people, and I don't know, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it really felt like the first real community gathering in a long time. The last time anything like this happened that I think you and I were both at, of course, was Dev Days in 2019, which was a relatively small New York City only event. Yep. And there were maybe, 50, at most 100 people there. And I think there were over 2,000 people at UnrealFest in New Orleans.
And they had to cap the registration.
Yeah, exactly. They sold out. And it was people from all over the world, all these incredible communities, people who make YouTube tutorials and work in incredible studios and are part of Epic themselves. And just what a blast to hang out with all these living legends, as we might say.
Yeah, for sure. I felt like I met a lot of people. I told you this a bunch. Like I felt like I was walking around and just like I would recognize someone and be like, oh, I watched actually an Unreal tutorial from them, like 8 years ago, and that's why I recognize them. It was cool. It was really cool to see all those people in one place. And also just a lot of new faces. One thing I did notice, even that first night, is that the majority of people I spoke to were not even games people. Like
right.
You would join a conversation and be like, oh, what do you do? What do you do? And then there'd be that one guy who's like, oh yeah, I'm in games. And everyone would just like ignore that guy. Like, oh, what is that guy doing here? Whereas, that is not what it would have been, 3-4 years ago, even.
Yeah. What were some of the sessions that stood out to you, Jacob?
Man, I think the thing is, every time I went to a session, it was always, man, I could go to that session or these other 3 that I also want to see. So I felt like I actually ended up just making way too many compromises in terms of all the stuff that I wanted to see versus what I got to see. I saw a few, I went to a bunch of sessions about, virtual production and media entertainment, because that's kind of my work domain. So I had to kind of justify the expense of the trip by, coming back with relevant information. Like if I came back with a bunch of like Unreal Engine tips, like you told me about Chris Murphy's talk, which I need to watch now. If I had just come back with Unreal tips, people would have not been that excited and been like, okay, Jacob, like we paid for a flight, we paid for a hotel, like maybe you should come back with more of that. So I ended up in a lot of virtual production, media entertainment stuff. That said, there were some really cool things. It just like we kind of talked about on one of our previous episodes was virtual production. Everyone's really just figuring this stuff out.
Yeah.
Like I don't think anyone kind of has the full scope yet. To the point where, people in the middle of talk are being like, we don't really have the tooling or the pipelining necessary to do this, this, and this. Like when that happens, then like we can do this, and that honestly, that was kind of cool to some extent. It was cool to see, that this industry is or kind of watch this grow. So I really enjoyed that. I went to a few talks. I went to one talk on geospatial computing, like the Cesium folks, a few guys from, kind of the surrounding industries, and a company called Maxar, who, I didn't know by name, but, they do satellite imagery for they did satellite imagery for Google Earth. So, they operate satellites, which is like a whole nother level of infrastructure, which I thought was fascinating. And yeah, I really enjoyed that one as well. I think at the end of the day, there's just so much that I wish I had seen, and I need to find the time to sit down and watch more YouTube videos.
Yeah.
How about you?
Oh, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I should say it. First time I'm saying this out loud. I didn't go to any talks.
Oh, you didn't go to one?
Wow, that's one. What I did end up doing was I kind of boxed myself into a corner by volunteering to be an assistant for almost all the labs. Like throughout the 3 days, there were labs happening all the time. And I knew the labs were the only things that wouldn't be recorded. They were these live sessions with about 30 minutes. And anyone who was coming into UnrealFest as a speaker through, a more internal part of Epic Games wasn't given a chance to sign up for any of those. And I was like, I wanted to go to the pixel streaming one and the stuff on the collaborative viewer template, all these different sessions. And ultimately, I saw when they asked for volunteers that was a way that I could get into all those sessions. But it meant that my days were just full of helping out with the labs. And in some cases, it's like, I don't actually know that topic very well. If I'm going to be helping out people in the room on it, I should probably learn a little more about that. But the nice thing I think that came out of both being a speaker and then being so involved with the labs was getting the blue shirt that anyone who is watching the video can see. This blue shirt is not like an indicator of like internal representative of Epic. It just meant like, someone who is at UnrealFest who needs to be able to get wherever they need to go, isn't going to need to wait in line, just can get into whatever room they need to for tech checks and all that. Yeah. Jacob, how did you end up with a blue shirt?
That's the question, right? How do I have a blue shirt? Because I did do some instructing for Epic, and I'm no longer doing that. So you might be wondering, hey, Jacob, did you steal one? Well, kind of, but Alex was TAing all these sessions, and I guess you ran into some issue. You had a call or something.
Yeah.
And I don't know who you asked, but they let me sub in as a TA for one of the courses with Ed
Bennett.
Ed Bennett, yeah, who's awesome, by the way. He did a course on procedural geometry, and I subbed in, and I had a great time, honestly. I had a great time because it was cool to kind of be back in that mode, running around, kind of helping people with the engine. That's the kind of thing that I miss about being an instructor is, being hands-on and kind of guiding people through this kind of journey with Epic or, Unreal Engine. So I really enjoyed that. And I got to keep the blue shirt. They still stopped me at the border, so to speak. There was another three levels. Yeah. So like there was a bottom level, then there was a second level where all the talks were. Then there was a top level with the hands-on lessons. And to get to the top level, because all the hands-on courses you had to reserve a space at, you couldn't go up unless you were registered for it, right? So I got to the top and I was like, oh, I'm TAing a course. I have the blue shirt. I ran down. They were very nice at the desk downstairs. They're like, we're going to take you on your word, which was very nice. They didn't have to do that. And then I got up and they said, no, your pass still says attendee. We can't let you up. So Alex had to come save me. But that is how I got the blue shirt. And I made sure to kind of let everyone know that I had a blue shirt after that. I kind of had to make sure everyone was aware that I had joined, the upper echelon of UnrealFest attendees. But yeah, I had a great time. I had a really great time. I'm sad to hear that you didn't get to any talks though.
Yeah, I mean, I've been catching up on them. I'll bring that up in a moment. I do want to say though, just like it was super kind of Jacob to sub in for me because I was in a real pickle. I'd committed to TAing one of these courses and really had an important client call at that time I couldn't get out of. And so they were frantically trying to find someone else who could sub in, but we were pretty stretched thin. And so I was like, look, Jacob, he's an Unreal Engine authorized instructor. He's good people. I can vouch for him. And eventually we did get all the proper approvals for him coming in. So it all worked out great. I have been watching, now that a bunch of the Unreal Fest videos have made their way to YouTube, I have been watching a bunch of them and they're excellent. Yeah. I love everything there. And I could recommend a whole bunch of different ones based on different industries people are interested in. But certainly the one that's just a great catch-all for everyone that Jacob already alluded to comes from our good friend Chris Murphy, who I got to meet for the first time over there. And yes, the talk is called 35 UE5 features you probably don't know about. Yeah. And there's probably actually like 75. And it's just like rapid fire. It's 50 minutes of like this feature, this feature, this feature. Yeah. And I knew maybe like 20% of them, but then the rest was like, holy cow, that would have saved me so much time.
There's a few of these videos on YouTube of like the evangelist team just going out and it'll just blow your, if you're like a dedicated Unreal Engine user, it'll just be like 45 minutes of you sitting there being like, with your jaw dropped, like I had no clue. Like it's just totally not obvious that you can do these things. And Chris Murphy's awesome. Yeah, I got to chat with him a little bit, and he was saying that with that presentation, he had a hard time because he's usually used to being very hands-on. And for that presentation, he had to do everything through slides, and he was all thrown off. But I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard it's great.
He did a great job. This might have been fixed by the time anyone sees this video, unless you're watching it live on Twitter right now. If you go to the actual Unreal Engine page, there's a bit of a problem with the video where the video is mostly on Chris during the video, so you don't actually see the slides, but he was also part of the full live stream. So if you find, I think it's day 2 of the live stream, that in that big giant 8-hour chunk, if you navigate to the part where Chris is speaking, it is actually just showing his slides during that presentation, so you can get all that meaty goodness there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what else has been your favorite from those?
I mean, I could mention a bunch, but I'm afraid that it's going to be too nitty gritty. I mean, I can say, by the way, that I really was hoping there'd be more VR content at UnrealFest. The collaborative viewer template was a lab that I was originally going to give. I handed it off to Simon Blakeney, who's a wonderful technical account manager over there. So we did a little bit of VR stuff as part of that lab. I know there was an AR talk that I haven't gotten a chance to check out yet. But then, yeah, I mean, I guess I haven't even really said directly yet. I gave a talk about virtual reality. It was called OpenXR in UE5. And certainly between all the labs I was TAing and preparing for that 2-hour talk, which was like a giant marathon of speaking, there was just not a lot of time for me to like sit down and relax and enjoy everyone else's presentations. So that's another reason why I was a little too busy during the week.
Yeah, your talk was great. I only got to the first half because I ran right after lunch because I was like I was exhausted by the time we got to that last day, and I had to like run to like see someone off. But man, I really enjoyed the first half, and it seemed like everyone was super excited to like have a VR talk. Like people were like, "Where's the VR content?" And I'm happy that you kind of got to fill that role and be the VR guy at UnrealFest.
Yeah, which is tricky because kind of like with this podcast as well, it's very tough to also toe that line between saying like, I do work for Epic and I teach for Epic and I know all these things about how to use Unreal Engine well. I am not an official representative of Epic. So when you get people asking like very direct questions about like when will this feature be released? And it's like, I can speculate, but I don't know. So it's tough to remind people that like I'm just a fan of the engine, just like you. But the talk did go very well, and in the second half in particular, we really dove deep into some things I didn't expect to, like the new enhanced input system, which is a wonderful new way of, especially if you want to migrate your inputs from one Unreal Engine project to another. They're all .u asset files now, so you're no longer going into an ini file and like modifying all the text there and like, oh, I want to keep these inputs but add these other new ones. You can just be like, hey, I'm migrating this one blueprint. As part of this blueprint, there's a whole bunch of inputs, and those are all UAsset files, and they'll all come along with it, and that's really nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. Honestly, I haven't like had a chance to dive into that, but I there's so much that I was like, oh man, I wish, like, I want to get into that. I want to try that. Oh man, yeah.
But that talk has not been posted yet. I heard they're releasing the talks in order, and I was the very last session as part of a very weird time slot because my talk was an hour and then a lunch break and then the other hour and then UnrealFest was over, which actually worked out well because I just stayed in my room for another hour and a half after that and gave demos, and then got taken to a secret demo. Someone actually pulled me into the Hilton Hotel later and showed me something that blew my mind.
Really?
And I hope that we get to talk about it on a future episode of the podcast. But that was like a really nice treat. I got to have the secret demo and then like rushed off to the airport and then just had that to think about on my my way to Korea.
Wow, yeah, that's a real like tease, man. I want to hear about that. Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah, that was really
man. Where do I get dragged into? That sounds awesome. Anyways,
I guess
so what else did you do in New Orleans? I saw you the first night.
Yeah.
What else did you get up to?
There was a really nice little partner mixer, just a whole bunch of Unreal people that I've become a fan of over the past few years. There's one guy named Arturo Brena, I think is his last name. He runs a really cool studio in New York as well. I saw him for the first time because he was giving a talk during an Unreal Engine broadcast event I was teaching at a few months ago. And he's one of these people that's still fairly new to Unreal Engine, but really dove in. He had a film called Thief that he made as part of the fellowship, and he was showing that at UnrealFest. And my kids love his little short film, and we've been talking for a while about what makes it special. So he's a very cool guy because his background is primarily broadcast, and he's coming into Unreal Engine from that. And he's interested in making more cinematic experiences, more hands-on and virtual reality and interactive. And then I'm coming more from that world, and I'm looking at a lot of the content I'm doing and also saying like, hey, it would kind of be nice if this could be more cinematic, and wouldn't it be nice to have like live streams that look great in addition to the more virtual reality / interactive versions. So we've been having these really nice conversations over the past couple months. We also keep seeing each other at different events, SIGGRAPH and AWE and what have you. So that's been a really fun discussion, and just goes back to what you're saying, Jacob, about like the breadth of people who are at UnrealFest, because I think one of the reasons why it's such a wonderful community is everyone has a certain level of humbleness, because everyone is still kind of a beginner to this engine. It's so hard to ever be a quote unquote expert because there's so many features and they're evolving all the time and things are getting better and there's new ways to do things. And so just to be able to talk to anyone that is exploring the engine and can talk about their background and what they were doing before Unreal Engine is always super exciting. And there's so many people that I would love to work with or just talk more or bring on our podcast here. So
100%. I spent some time with the folks at TensorWorks who are based in Australia. So they came all the way to the US for the conference, and that was really awesome. I'm hoping they'll come on the podcast at some point. But I ended up spending a lot of the evenings with them and some of the other cloud folks, just kind of having a good time. I saw some awesome music. We ran into the lead audio engineer. What's his name? It's like Aaron, or man, this is gonna kill me. We ran into him at a jazz club downtown at 11 p.m. and we ended up striking up a conversation about audio and Unreal Engine in this jazz club, which was just awesome, right? Like that's the best possible scenario, right? You walk into a club, you have a drink, you listen to some awesome music, and then you can just talk about Unreal. What else?
I also ended up in a jazz club, and what a awesome part of New Orleans, just the music out there and the food. Yeah, I wish I got to spend more time in the city, because I was mostly just in the convention hall and then like little tiny things out at night. I'm also embarrassed to say I missed the big Mardi Gras-esque parade.
Yeah. You had something to do on a deadline or something?
That was the
Yeah.
for my talk, and I hadn't done nearly as much work on it as I had planned on doing by that point.
Gotcha.
So I was like, I don't deserve the festivities right now. I have to put my head down and get this done.
It was a good time. It was a good time. Yeah. It's so Fortnite money is good money. That's the thing. It's like it's always going to be big. It's going to be a ton of nerds, and it's always a good time. It's always a good time. Man, all right. So that was Unreal. I mean, that's really just a pretty brief recap of UnrealFest. But what was your key takeaways from the week? Like, what? Give me one or two things that you felt were, really impactful about that time.
The key takeaways for me were that everyone wants to help. Everyone is eager to hear about anything you're working on and how they could work together to make it better. I mean, to bring up the TensorWork folks, for example, like I was peeking into that lab session because I was TAing another one, but then talking to Luke and some of those folks afterwards, I've now had all these great follow-up conversations with them, and we're discussing all these new features that we could either add to the official Unreal Engine pixel streaming plugin or start to potentially do as like a fork of their GitHub or something like that. And there's a number of instances of that, of just people who realized that there was some way I could help them or they could help me. And it's just all about that community building. So to see all these people in person, especially how many of them I had met before, but only in a virtual capacity. I'm someone who's a big fan of virtual reality, but there's nothing that quite replaces those face-to-face meetings. So that was really quite lovely to me. I also want to give one more shout out to the Corys, Corey Straussberger from Kite and Lightning, and Corey Williams, who's an OG YouTube star, both of whom are doing really exciting work with virtual production and digital humans. And, Corey Straussberger was recently featured on an Unreal Engine case study for his YouTube series Xanadu, which is a breathtaking feat of one man doing every part of like a digital short kind of thing, episode after episode. And Corey Straussberger has a new company called Taiyaki Studios, which is trying to develop digital characters for people to bring across different platforms, including Unreal Engine. And the efforts that I've seen both of them putting into showing what's possible with a small budget, or one person on a team or a very small team, to generate really compelling content is just so exciting to me. For anyone that has storytelling ambitions, to start to see Unreal Engine as a one-stop shop for expressing yourself in whatever crazy, wacky way you might see fit. That's something that I really came away from UnrealFest thinking like, wow, these tools just keep getting better. And between the tools themselves and the community of people who want to help everyone learn those tools, I just feel like we're in a time of an embarrassment of riches, I guess you could say.
Yeah, honestly. I felt like the biggest thing that I walked away with is that this thing is just moving faster than like any of us can fathom. It feels like every time you log in and you look at the Unreal Engine like Git repo or whatever, like so much has changed. And there's so much new stuff, and there's so many cool things going on that like it's just like it's getting away from everyone. Like there are I would imagine very few people who still have like a full picture of everything that's going on inside this community, even inside just like the technical parts of this. Like I think it's just nuts to kind of witness. And I really got the feeling that a lot of people there, compared to kind of the sorts of, kind of vendor specific conferences that you might see elsewhere, like everyone was having a great time because they don't have to pay for Unreal Engine. Like that's like, I think we really kind of underestimate how big an effect that has. Like everyone there is choosing to use Unreal Engine because they like it, whether or not they can afford it, maybe they're starting a business based on it. It doesn't matter. Like everyone there enjoys working in this tool, and no one like it wasn't like gate kept, like anyone can kind of participate. And that's a huge deal, because then you just see all sorts of interesting people, and like you get a chance to just, this thing just accelerates in a crazy way, which I think is one of the brilliant things that, Epic did with Unreal Engine. Just the fact that they made that commitment and have kept to it is huge. I think the other big thing is that, like I said at the beginning, and like we mentioned a couple of times, that Unreal Engine is like, it's not it's calling it a game engine and kind of bucketing it to games is funny now, right? Like, because it's really so much more than that. Like there's, I mean, I would assume, and I think they throw this up on a slide at like the keynote, that 55 to 65% of the licensees or something like that are for games.
Mm-hmm.
And that might sound like, oh, that's a lot, but no, it's a game. Like if you looked at this, 10 years ago, it would have been, 89, 90, 95%, so Unreal Engine really isn't a game engine. It's something else, right? And it's really kind of fascinating to see that. Those were my key takeaways.
Yeah. Pretty cool event. I hope they do it again.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm sure they will, honestly. I think everyone had such a valuable time there.
One funny quick last observation about everyone on the staff and speaker side was the frantic holy cow, Unreal Engine Preview 1 just dropped. I guess we better try to include some 5.1 content in a talk that I originally created for 5.0. And then the first day of UnrealFest, Unreal 5.1 Preview 2 came out. Now everyone's like, oh, I was going to give a live demo. Do I try to upgrade to Preview 2? Is it going to be more stable? Is it going to crash? That was just a hilarious scampering going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. Man. All right, we better keep moving here because we got a lot to talk about.
We have a lot to talk about.
Okay, so tell me about Korea. So you flew pretty much straight from New Orleans to Korea. Tell me what that was about.
So I was invited very generously a few months ago to be the guest of honor, the international speaker extraordinaire for an event called the Seoul Performing Arts Festival, which takes place every year. It's the biggest live arts event that happens in Korea. It takes place over a month. There's all sorts of live shows and talks and workshops. And originally, I thought the idea was that I was just going to go for a little talk. Great, fantastic, no problem at all. But then as the discussions went on and there's some, translating going on during this, I thought that words were being used interchangeably to suggest like, yes, we want you to give a talk. What I eventually realized is there were actually 3 things they wanted me to do. Give an hour and a half long talk with 30 minutes of Q&A, give a big demo showcase of a bunch of the, Unreal Engine VR projects with live event theater stuff going on in them, and then also give a 2-day workshop in using Unreal Engine for performing arts, which was quite the task, especially because since I was there as Alex Coulomb and Agile Lens and not as Alex Coulomb, Unreal Engine authorized instructor, I couldn't use any of the training content as part of that 2-day workshop that I had developed as part of the work I do for Epic. So it was a very frantic, like on the plane, trying to decide if I was going to fall asleep or work on all the different content that needed to happen there. We were also trying to figure out if we were going to use some cloud streaming through Jacob's company CoreWeave, because we knew that it could work okay in terms of if the internet was fast enough in Korea, we could hit like our New York servers and have something going on, but we weren't sure if we had people in VR, if the latency would be too much. But we did find in the end that while VR was a little bit tricky, we were able to get away with pixel streaming through a browser, and that all worked out really well. But the short version is that I was there for 8 days, and for 3 of those days, I have almost no memory of what was going on because every second of the day was planned, and I had a translator the whole time. And as anyone who's ever spent any time with me or listened to this podcast knows, I have a tendency to speak very fast because I get very excited and very enthusiastic. And I was painstakingly speaking as slow as I possibly could. So my poor translator didn't have a conniption trying to keep up with me. So it's funny because like the talk I gave that was an hour and a half long, probably would have been like a 40-minute talk if I was speaking at my normal speed. But I was there like pausing between each word, giving an extra pause after each sentence.
Yeah.
And it was painful for the keynote. When I was giving the workshops, it wasn't actually so bad. I thought that actually worked out really well because the pauses that I had to give after like, okay, everyone, open up a blueprint, create a new custom event called dampen camera, whatever. The pause that I would take there to let the translator do their work was actually great because it helped pace everyone as they went through creating everything. And during the workshops, we talked about the remote control API, virtual reality template, the collaborative viewer template, because that's a great out-of-the-box multiplayer solution. We talked about metahumans. We showed, or I showed everyone how they could scan someone and then bring that into MetaHuman Creator through Mesh to MetaHuman, the plugin, and then start controlling that with Live Link Face. So I tried to give like a nice smorgasbord of all these different workflows of how Unreal Engine could be used in different contexts. And what was nice, because some Unreal Engine users there were more advanced than others, I would be giving these lessons, but then every 30 minutes or so, I would take a pause and go around the room and check in with everyone. And I made it very clear, like, if what I'm teaching right now isn't super relevant to the work you're doing, work on your own thing, and then we'll talk about that. So it was about 50-50. About half of everyone who I spoke to had questions about what I was showing on screen and wanted to understand that better. The other 50% were like, hey, I'm trying to make this live performance cat, dog, rabbit experience. Do you have any idea why my animation blueprint isn't behaving the way I think it should? And so I would just kind of, sit down with everyone.
That's tough. That's tough to pick up people's projects though, right? Like,
yeah. But, I kind of love that too. Like for, the Unreal Authorized Instructor program with instructor-led training, we have all these courses that we teach, but then also we do these Q&A sessions. And the Q&A sessions are terrifying and really fun because they're unstructured. It's kind of just, people come into their questions and just ask them. And then for 2 hours, you're just doing your best to respond and saying like, oh, I really don't know the answer to that, but like, I'll try to get back to you. Or you're saying, I really don't know the answer to that, but let's see if we can solve it together right now in the moment, which is always a fun challenge. Like, at what point are you showing a good process for troubleshooting and trial and error? Yeah. And at what point is it like, okay, we just worked on this for 30 minutes and got nowhere, we need to move on?
Yeah, that I remember when I was teaching courses, like, I mean, because I taught a lot of courses on blueprints, like occasionally you're going to hit a point while you're presenting, usually, where it's like something's not working. I don't know why. And like, I always had a backup project on my computer. That's the classic thing, right? You save off a copy at different stages so that if you fuck up, you can just kind of get to that next checkpoint. But I would try and on the fly kind of evaluate and be like, okay, like what can I do to troubleshoot? Like, how can I kind of teach them good practices? Because there are a lot of troubleshooting tips or tools built into Unreal with like the debugger system and kind of doing step throughs and stuff like that. And it's a pretty powerful system that people just don't know how to use because it's easier just to print to the screen, right? Like it's just easier. But every once in a while, be like, okay, I'm going to try and go through this. 15, 20 minutes later, we make it. And then I would almost always get a comment being like, I'm so glad you walked through that. Like that's going to save me so much time next time I run into an issue. So I think if you can do that, like that's always going to kind of pay off for everyone, honestly. Like you get to kind of refine the practice of troubleshooting while also teaching someone else like what your mental thought process is of getting through an issue. Right.
Yeah. Something else that was cool about some of the attendees of the workshop was some of them were, just starting out in Unreal Engine for the first time. Some of them had been doing it for 7 or 8 years, like longer than me. And some of them were trying to understand how they could use Unreal Engine as in terms of budgeting for like a very large project and hiring people. So I had one choreographer coming to speak to me afterwards about a dance piece they're putting together. And they were trying to wrap their head around the costs they should budget for, doing the thing they wanted to do. And I was throwing out some numbers thinking like, oh, I know how tough it is in the arts, like budgets are always low and tight. And she's like, oh, what you're saying is very inexpensive. And I was like, oh, well, ideally it would be, 3 times the number I just said. She said, that is still very inexpensive. And I'm like, oh my God.
Like, hire me. Yeah.
Dance piece.
Yeah.
It's nice to imagine that Unreal Engine could start to be used in very high production value, performance art, as I don't think is happening very much right now. The closest thing you might see is like a live concert, but dance, theater, things like that tend not to have that happening as much. So it's cool to think there could be more of that on its way.
Yeah, for sure. So I saw at one point you were giving a talk in like some sort of silo. Like, what was that about?
It was really cool. And I should show some pictures of the different places I was at. So everything that I was doing for the Seoul Performing Arts Festival was in a place called the Oil Drum Event Center or something like that, or the Oil Drum Arts House. And they're literally these giant freaking oil drums that are decommissioned and repurposed to be these event spaces. So the first one where I was giving my showcase and my talk in, they just converted it all to like concrete and glass, and that one's like beautiful and steel. And then the one I was giving the workshop in, I think they left it all as this like original, copper metal. And the acoustics, the feeling of the spaces was super cool, and I loved being inside spaces like that while speaking. Similarly, because in addition to those spaces, there were so many awesome things I saw while in Seoul. I found that less so than trying to take pictures of things, I was using apps on my phone like Reality Capture and Polycam and Sitescape, and actually creating, digital twins of as much as I could. I went to visit Lotte Concert Hall, which was actually the very first theater I worked on. And Lotte Concert Hall is right next to this giant shopping complex and Lotte Tower, which is the 5th tallest building in the world. And in the shopping complex, they had like a Studio Ghibli store with like a Totoro cat bus and all that. So there's so many things where it's like, okay, I'll take a picture, but then I'll spend like 2 extra minutes just walking around this thing and scanning it. And then I did a lot of that before I was done teaching my workshop. So then the next day I came into the workshop and I'd inserted all these things from like the Korean Contemporary Art Museum and things I saw on the street and this 2,000-year-old palace. And I put all that in Unreal Engine and then let people like walk around in VR and see this mishmash of all these different parts of the city, which really blew people away. And also I think just created a very nice capstone of my trip.
Yeah, that's like a good souvenir, right? Have you seen the stuff that like Luma AI is doing?
Yes, I tried to use Luma AI while over there. I could never quite get the number of like circulations around something as it wanted, but I really want to play with it more. It seems super cool. Have you?
I have not tried it yet. I think it's very cool. The results I've seen have been really interesting. Obviously, like you feel like you're always getting something that's cherry picked when it comes to scanning. Like scanning is tough. But it's the results I have seen like have handled things that other things have not, like, glass. And I saw one capture of like a fire, like a fire pit, people standing around it, which usually, would be nonsense, right? You would get a scan and it'd probably be some huge blown out blob in the center, because a fire just emits ton of, light of all spectrum, and it's just going to mess with anything. Right. But no, like you spun around and it was like, it didn't look like a perfect cartoon fire, but it was contained and it looked nice. So I've been very impressed with the results I've been seeing there. But and there's just so many cool projects kind of like that, AI enabled everything, that I think is fascinating. And I'll actually probably throw out one during our shout outs later. So we'll get to that. But yeah, I think that's so cool. So what are you scanning with when you're just walking around?
Just my iPhone, just an iPhone 12 Pro Max, and trying to keep a battery with me so it doesn't die. I didn't have a SIM card most of the time I was there, so I was really at the whim of whatever public Wi-Fi I was getting.
So you're just taking pictures and then you put it in what?
Yeah, so the different apps work in different ways. So, and we should draw a slight distinction here between like LiDAR and photogrammetry and NeRFs, neural radiance fields. I think Luma AI actually uses NeRFs, but things like Polycam, they can use like the LiDAR sensor on the back of like an iPhone, and it'll actually mesh geometry in real time. It tends not to be super accurate, but it's a great way to get like the basic dimensions of whatever object or space you're walking around. Then yeah, things like Sitescape will create like a point cloud, and that can also be meshed if you want to, or you leave it as a point cloud. And then things like Polycam can also allow you to take a whole bunch of photos, which is classic photogrammetry, and then you can upload all those photos to the cloud, and then it processes them all and spits back out a 3D model where if you did a good job and your photos weren't blurry and you got enough angles, you can get like a chef's kiss, very beautiful 3D model of a space or an object. And for the most part, yeah, that's what I was trying to do whenever I could.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just an aside, side story. We were opening a new office in Jersey, and we have this bright blue wall. And when I walked in, I was like, oh, this is perfect. So I brought out my phone. I opened up Skyglass, which I think we talked about on an episode. I opened up Skyglass, and I had our CEO standing like next to the wall. And I was showing everyone, hey, this is being pixel streamed, and we're getting this awesome, and it worked great. It was super cool. Sorry, that's a side story that I love have to bring up, but that's awesome. So, like, how did you enjoy South Korea? Like,
it was great, and unlike New Orleans, once I was done with my talks and workshops, I actually did have a couple days to explore the city. And my hosts were so generous. Like anytime I wanted to go somewhere, they're like, "We're happy to like send you a taxi and take you from point A to point B." And they gave me like a per diem, so I had cash all day to do different things. But I got to go to a theater show, which was a dance piece using Rococo and motion capture and all that, which was super cool. Although, funnily enough, their Rococo suit was broken. I was supposed to bring our Rococo suit. Our Rococo suit was broken. This team is called Geoi Immersive, and they do incredible immersive theater over there. I actually first heard about them because they translated a piece called Welcome to Respite, which is a beautiful VR chat, VR theater piece. And they took it from English and the Ferryman Collective, who made it over on the West Coast in LA and made it work in Korean. But they were a big help the entire time I was there. And the food they took me out to was amazing. The theater show we saw was amazing. Just walking around Seoul as a city was incredible. It's such a safe, comfortable walking city with a really diverse set of buildings and neighborhood feelings. And I just never had a dull moment. It was a really good time. And I should say I never had a dull moment, but I also was able to just be like, I have an hour free now. I'm just going to walk that way for a bit and kind of see what I stumble upon. And that was really lovely.
That's awesome. It's really cool.
That's how I ended up at places like the Contemporary Art Museum, which were beautiful. And to scan a bunch of the pieces in there was also a blast. Some people saw me also taking some of the pieces and like using my phone, just starting to mix them all together. And they're like, how are you doing that right now? That seems impossible.
That's cool. That's cool. Awesome, man. So, okay. So how long were you there? You were there like
I was there for 8 days. Yeah. I just got back a week ago, or almost a little over a week ago, late Saturday night. And I'm almost back on East Coast time. Not quite.
Yeah, sure. Oh, I forgot to mention, by the way, when we were talking about, because I was about to segue to something else, but I realized I forgot to bring up about UnrealFest is that I tried Tilt 5.
Good.
And it was awesome. It was you had told me about it, and you kind of sung its praises, and I was excited to see it, and it was awesome. Like I want one, right? Like I definitely want one.
I love how guerrilla rogue style Tilt 5 is. Like they did not have an official booth at UnrealFest. They had a guy, Ryan, who is just kind of going around and popping up in different places and like pulling out the Tilt 5 board and just giving demos, which I thought was delightful. And yes, Tilt 5 is amazing. Jerry Ellsworth, the CEO, is one of the smartest people I've ever met in the world. The Unreal Engine plugin recently came out. I'm fortunate. I've been beta testing it for a little while, and it is so plug and play. Like you drop the plugin in your Unreal Engine project, you open it up, your Tilt 5 acts the same way VR Preview does, and you can just see whatever's going on in your scene happening now on the board in front of you. It's a really cool device and experience for augmented reality at a much wider field of view than what you would get with Magic Leap or HoloLens.
Wider field of view, and I really did not count on how big a deal it would be just to have natural occlusion with my hands.
Yes,
like that's one of the things, like in VR, you struggle to do that in pretty much every case. Like it's an extremely complicated problem. I haven't tried the new, Meta headset, but it's so complicated when you're in VR, and you have to account for so many things, and it becomes difficult, especially if you want to do like AR, MR, all that kind of stuff. You want natural occlusion, but it was just like, no, you just put the glasses on and like your hands are there, and it all of a sudden it just clicks. It's just awesome. And for their target market, which I guess is primarily like, tabletop gaming, I think it's just brilliant. Like, I mean, 100% I'd rather be doing that than a board game, and it's not uncomfortable. It's not heavy. It just makes so much sense.
Yeah, and I love the way that they're very focused from a marketing angle on tabletop gaming, which I'm a huge fan of. I used to design board games in all of my free time back in the day. We could talk about that. Actually, funnily enough, the very first conversation I had with Jerry was, I had no idea who she was, but she asked if she could interview me about some of the board games I made. And I'm like, sure, random lady. And I didn't know about Tilt 5 or any of her work. And that was a really cool introduction. But in addition to tabletop gaming, I think the device and the setup, it's so easy to look at it and also think like, oh, the utility here for ArcViz and looking at like a site model, the utility here for tabletop theater, or looking at an automotive, design, whatever, is really endless. So I really wish them the best. And I have 3 Tilt 5s here at my house. And so I'm looking forward to
send me one.
Sorry?
If you want, someone can send me a Tilt 5 if they want.
Ooh, cool.
I will accept one. I don't have enough followers though. So if you want me to have a Tilt 5, follow me on Twitter.
Yes, and make sure to send the board too, because I have 3 sets of Tilt 5 glasses, but only 1 board. So, right now everyone has to gather around that single board. That being said, you can also buy like a very cheap retroreflective material on like Amazon or something. I got some for $20, hung it up on my wall, and that becomes this wonderful extension to your Tilt 5 gaming area. Which, by the way, just to really quickly, what Jacob was saying about occlusion, the way hand occlusion works is because projectors are coming out of the Tilt 5 and they need to hit this surface in order to be displayed. So since your hand probably is not retroreflective, it just naturally blocks that view. And it's just, there's your hands and there's the digital content behind it. It's so natural and doesn't take any extra processing power. So super cool.
It makes so much sense. It just makes so much sense. Yeah. It's such a clever invention. Like retroreflectivity, to think of using that, like, that's so cool.
And I encourage people to find like the podcasts where Jerry goes into detail about all this. Like the short version is that this was something she did by accident while she was working at Valve on, at first, their VR initiatives, and she had some projectors that were in backwards. They were supposed to be going into her eyes, and they went out, and she saw it reflecting off of something, and the rest is history. So pretty cool.
So cool. Yeah. So to segue to what I was originally going to segue to, you have the new Meta Quest Pro.
Yeah.
I'm very jealous of this also. Alex has all the cool toys.
All the cool toys. Yeah, these controllers are great. They feel excellent. They're the most ergonomic VR controllers I've ever had. And they have like a little pen tip. This little part here can twist off.
I was very intrigued if it like actually made sense to use.
I didn't think it would, but it actually feels like a big black magic marker version of like a Wacom, because it's pressure sensitive. And basically, once you have the pen tip in there, you don't have to worry about pressing any triggers or anything like that. You can just press on a table and start to draw in virtual reality or mixed reality, where you still see the real world. And it feels really good. My 5-year-old made like a beautiful giant painting tonight in Gravity Sketch.
That's awesome.
And my favorite thing to do is to take those kinds of concept drawings, tilt brush, Gravity Sketch, etc., and then bring that into Unreal Engine, and it becomes kind of like 3D trace paper for then deciding what the more refined version will be. Yeah.
I mean, it reminds me, I think we talked about, actually, I can't remember where I heard about this, but I know you were talking about at some point, just about how in like Tilt Brush and all the like art, the classic VR art programs, there was like 2 or 3 things that everyone would do when they put on a headset and Tilt Brush. The first thing that I saw was sign their name was one. Like they would either sign their name, they'd draw a smiley face, or they would just stand there frozen, like not knowing
what do I do.
It was one of those, right? Like, And it never did I see someone just instantly start doing 3D everything. So I'm wondering if like this kind of interaction where, you know, you have a pencil, something that you understand, and someone can just start using that, if they see that as a way of kind of introducing people to VR in a way that makes more sense than Tilt Brush. Like for some people, paying $20 for Tilt Brush and then standing there and not really realizing the potential of it, unless there's someone to guide you, you know, that's tricky. Versus like if it comes with a little accessory, you put it on, you start drawing, you start writing. At some point, you're going to lift it up and you'll discover like, oh man, this is all this can do. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, you're triggering the part of me that always wants to rant about skeuomorphism and how, especially with these emerging mediums like virtual reality, there's certainly a benefit to starting with things that are familiar. You know, everyone knows how to use a pen or how to use a internet browser, which is great for introducing people to these worlds. But then at a certain point, someone like me who's been in VR for 10 years now gets very frustrated when something doesn't take more advantage of the possibilities of virtual space and the digital medium and stops at something like that. So like, I have no problem with starting with like, yes, let's draw on a real table with a real pen, but then you also have to like take advantage of being able to draw giant skyscrapers at scale and fly around and, you know, use all sorts of materials that would be impossible to use in the real world. So it can be both, ideally.
Sure. So, okay. I watched some of your informal review of the MetaQuest Pro. Give me some of your hot takes on this device. Like, what?
Yeah, I can sum it up pretty easily. It's a beautiful device. It fits very comfortably. It's actually a great developer kit for both the future of wherever Meta is going, but also augmented reality and mixed reality. I think anyone who's going to be doing something for Tilt 5 or Magic Leap or HoloLens, like this is a great place to start to prototype that, because to me, the color pass-through cameras are totally serviceable for looking around your environment and placing digital content in it. I was also making the observation the other night that if I'm trying to get some work done, I like to actually have my television on. And it's tricky if I'm doing that in full VR, because every time I put my VR headset on, I can't see my television. Alternatively, I've used plugins before where I'll put like Netflix on in VR, but I'm in and out of VR all the time. And I realized all of a sudden that the mixed reality pass-through was good enough that I could just leave my television playing. And as I come in and out of VR, I could still like see enough of what was going on to feel like, okay, I'm not missing too much of the story. So it's a comfortable headset. The battery life dies pretty quick. The controllers feel amazing.
Yeah, I was shocked by that. You said it's like an hour and a half?
Yeah, it's pretty quick. And it depends, of course, what kind of application you're running. But the reason I have this, the main reason I got this is because some of those in our audience might know that I'm very excited about the future of metahumans and live performance and theater and all of that. And I wanted to see how well the cameras that we probably can't see that are like on the inside of here, how good of a job they do at capturing your eye tracking and your mouth tracking to translate that to a metahuman. And the answer is, at the moment, there is no effort coming from Meta at all to make this work with a metahuman. There is an Unreal Engine sample project that requires the source build of Unreal 4.27, and there's something called the Movement SDK, which is different from the Meta Avatar SDK. And there's like a very generic alien avatar in there that actually, to me, had very impressive facial capture. I felt like a lot of subtle motion with my eyes and mouth and whatnot were being captured there. In addition to I could use hand tracking. I could use, the controllers if I wanted to and get almost a Valve Index level of hand tracking. And it kind of knew what my upper body was doing, though we're nowhere near the point of like, we have legs yet.
Yeah.
And so I started down the path of trying to translate this over into metahumans, but it's really like a backwards manual process. There's just no real connection between how metahumans work and how the Meta SDK is working. So I'll get there. But for the moment, actually, I just have to give a shout out to HTC, because this is my Vive Focus 3 dev kit. And this also has like eye trackers and a little mouth tracker there. And this one actually is set up to work really well with metahumans, and it goes through LiveLink, and LiveLink is much easier to broadcast, say, in a theater event to many, many people. So for some stuff that I've got coming up in the next couple months, I was thinking I might be using the MetaQuest Pro, and I might actually be using the Vive Focus 3. So we'll see how that goes.
Vive Focus 3 was a cool device. I got to try it once. I thought it was pretty nice. It didn't get the attention, obviously, that Meta did, but it really just seems Meta has dropped the ball on so much. And it's just shocking to me, honestly. I mean, the device seems really cool. Like, what Meta has always done really well is their hardware. You know, the physical hardware is awesome. Like, they've done an exceptional job. The stuff that they do with like AI, inside out tracking and all that, obviously has been a game changer for VR, consistently. But like back in the day, it felt like they were very tightly coupled with the community of developers inside of Unreal and Unity, and whereas I have not gotten that impression more recently, or at least it seems that, like, I mean, most of the folks that I knew there aren't there anymore. So maybe, I mean, I'm sure that's part of it. But the stories I have heard is that, like, besides like the link cable and some of the like kind of ease of use stuff, it hasn't progressed the way people kind of expected it to for such a big company.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to our discussion about what a lovely event UnrealFest was, I mean, that's how Oculus Connect used to feel back in the day. And now it's just a streaming event. I was very surprised by how wooden and overly scripted everything at Meta Connect was this year. I can't remember if we've already talked about it.
I couldn't even watch it. Yeah, I can't watch it.
It just felt very like, and now we are going to present this. Isn't this great? Yes, it sure is, Mark. And there's no real value to that for me. And so, like exactly what you said, just to echo your sentiment, I think it's a incredible device. The hardware is there, the potential is all there. It's very poorly marketed. It's not worth $1,500 unless you're a dev who's really diving into where all of this is going to be. I think the MetaQuest 2 Pro or MetaQuest Pro 2 will be a bit of a game changer, especially because by that point they'll be using an actually new mobile chipset. Right now it's using the Qualcomm Snapdragon XR2 Plus, which is actually, as far as I know, exactly the same chip as before with the Quest 2. It's just like overclocked or probably
more power.
Probably
why it dies so fast.
RAM.
That was my
like, it's not that much more powerful. The resolution in the headset is like pretty much the same if you're just doing regular VR. But the whole, I could rant about this for a while, and people can read my Twitter thread, but I was baffled by the onboarding. The onboarding made it not clear at all what I was supposed to be using this headset for. Like, the first thing that popped up was like, do you want to install all your games? And it's like, I thought this is supposed to be for like work and mixed reality, and you're presenting me with like all my VR games right off the bat. So, that's a longer discussion. I wanted to call quick attention to this device that also recently came out from Vive. I've been using this with the Vive Focus 3. This is a wrist tracker. And on the one hand, this helps with things like occlusion if you are having your hands like pass over each other, which can be a problem traditionally in hand tracking applications. But it can also be used instead of as a wrist tracker. This can be the equivalent of a Vive tracker, where you can map this to anything, a chair or an object or in like theater design kind of stuff. I've done like a railing. And now the kind of stuff that you used to need base stations and actual Vive trackers for to be able to do, now you can do that in a mobile way. So basically you can have your controllers and your hand tracking and this, which means there's a lot more that can be happening inside a totally standalone device, which wasn't possible before. So I think that's also just an underutilized advantage that Vive has over Meta right now.
Man, I hope HTC is giving us an ad spot, man, like that. You've been all over it, but yeah, that's some cool stuff. You get to play with all this really awesome HTC stuff, and I remember I saw a demo a while back of their like virtual production, like
Mars,
their like box, and that was so cool. I was like, we all need this. Like, it just, even if you're not doing virtual production, just being able to drop in a system, attach all your sensors, everything. And it just handles all the setup. Like, I would have loved that back when, I was giving demos of the Vive.
Yeah.
Just a drop-in system that handles all that stuff is awesome. But I mean, when you add in like Gen Lock and all this other cool stuff, man, so cool. they don't get enough attention for all the cool hardware that they're building. At least in the U. I don't know how it is overseas, but in the U.S. it doesn't seem like they get the attention that, you know, and maybe that's just part of the VR community right now. But really cool stuff. I remember they came out with the Vive Pro Eye, and like there was no one using it. And I was like, that's so cool. We've all been talking about this. Like, we all want eye tracking. We all want to do foveated rendering and all this other cool stuff. But they were just doing it. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that was about.
Yeah, I agree. And I understand now, like, foveated rendering, of course, had this huge promise at the beginning. Like, oh my goodness, you're only going to render just what you're looking at. That's going to mean like 300% reductions in the amount of rendering being done. As I understand it practically right now, even the best eye tracking with foveated rendering is only giving about a 30% bit of savings, because there's still like a fairly wide amount of space that still needs to be rendered to make up for like latency with eye tracking.
Yeah.
I do want to give a shout out though to, on the MetaQuest Pro, Red Matter 2, which, like, I already had seen Red Matter 1 and thought that was the most beautiful Unreal Engine game on a standalone headset ever. Red Matter 2 came out a couple months ago. Oh my God, even better. But then with the MetaQuest Pro, they did release a proper version with eye tracking and foveated rendering. And it's ungodly, like how sharp the materials, the lighting, the textures, even the people inside this experience. I just can't believe this is all being rendered on device. I mean, this is the reason why I'm doing so much with cloud streaming, is because I just felt like there was no way you could ever achieve the quality that I was looking for with a standalone device. And the folks at, I think the company's called Vertical Robot, what they've done with Red Matter 2 is absolutely on another level. So I
actually never finished the first game. I think I have it. I think I started it, but I need to finish it. And I actually had no clue that there was a second game out. I have to check that out. Definitely have to check that out.
Looks even more amazing.
That's hard to believe. Yeah,
I know. I think they're using like a hyper customized version of Unreal though. Like, they've dug into like all the shader code and changed a whole bunch of stuff. I keep waiting for them to release like a marketplace pack or something like that.
Yeah, that'd be so cool, right? Oh man. Yeah.
So do we want to move on to some shout outs for the week?
Let's do it. All
right. After you, sir.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've been working a lot on, well, a bunch of stuff. One of the things that's been catching my eye more and more, and I alluded to this earlier, what are the kind of new AI use cases that are coming about in Unreal Engine. There have been a ton of really interesting projects all over the place, from drop in AI, NPC conversation bots, all the way to like, AI generation with things like, the geometry scripting, right? But one of the cool things that is interesting, because the company I work at, called CoreWeave, we do a lot in media entertainment, which is kind of the stuff I focus on. But we also have another side of the house that focuses on AI, machine learning stuff. And every once in a while, it's cool when they cross. And so one of the big things that's been happening more recently has been with Stable Diffusion, people starting to use it in Unreal Engine. And there's been a few really cool projects that I just have been absolutely baffled by, how quickly people took to taking this open source project. I guess I should take a step back and kind of introduce people to Stable Diffusion. So if you haven't heard about this, it all started because Meta, right, released. Why am I blanking all of a sudden? What was their text to image? Oh, sorry, that was OpenAI, wasn't it?
Oh, sure, yeah.
DALL-E. Sorry, yeah, they released DALL-E 2 or 3, I can't remember, and that was this huge improvement of text image. So you put in a prompt, and it gives you this fascinating image. I'm sure everyone has kind of seen this to some extent, right? Well, that model, as well as Google's image gen, those models, they belong to the respective companies. So like OpenAI owns DALL-E, and image gen is owned by Google, and you kind of needed to sign up on a wait list. And then these guys at Stability AI went and trained an open source version of a similar model using a very similar data set as well. And they released it open source. So that anyone could see the weights, they could see how it was trained. Well, maybe not see how it was trained, but like see how the model works and modify it to whatever extent people wanted. And so all of a sudden, people are just showing up having taken this tool that, you know, seemed like science fiction. All of a sudden, people are just applying it to like everything. And it's been absolutely fascinating. So one of the projects, and I'll throw this in a shout out, is by a guy, Jake Rice, who is an effects, actually a VFX supervisor at Disney, according to his Twitter profile. But he was working on a concept that I was really fascinated with, which is, okay, back in the day when you were making materials for games, especially when you were just learning, it was always, and this was pre-mega scans and pre a lot of this like kind of more kit bashing stuff that I think is actually really awesome today. Like there's no point in going out and building a bunch of materials if you can just like kit bash it from mega scans, in my opinion. But back in the day that didn't exist. So what you would do is you would, if you had like basic Photoshop knowledge, you'd go in and you try your best to like make a texture. And then there was software like Crazy Bump is one that I ran into back in the day that would take that and it would spit out things like normal maps and you know, maybe displacement maps. And it was just using kind of like stupid processing to say, okay, here's the contrast in this image. I'm going to assume that means like a change in depth or, you know, anything like that. But what I've been interested in is, okay, like let's say you have this text to image. What happens if you like feed in a UV map and tell it, I would like a, you know, a surface that is, you know, a moss covered rock. Can you get something out where it actually, can you train it at least to get something out where you have a material that is cohesive to the UV maps that you apply, right? So you take the topology of an object, you can even encode like 3D space into the image. We talked about actually image packing in our previous episode, kind of encoding data in image data. Well, you could take that. Let's see if you could feed that all in. Could you get something cohesive? Well, this guy, Jake Rice, is working on it. And he's been posting some cool updates more recently about some of the results he's gotten. And it's been really exciting. I'm really kind of pumped for when this is a tool, because instead of kind of even going to Megascans and getting something, or maybe you use Megascans as a starter, you then say specifically what you want. Like, okay, I would like a mossy rock with, you know, a smooth velvet texture on top as a, you know, like you could kind of go crazy, and you could even do faces maybe. I don't know, because at the end of the day, like a metahuman, you can unwrap the face into this like ungodly, you know, terrifying UV map, and maybe that works. Like maybe you could train it. And I figured, oh, well, we could probably train this thing on Megascans data. You know, we could take all the awesome topology and models and everything that, you know, has been, you know, generated and put up for free in Megascans. You could take that, feed it through, and use those as training data. And I really want to do this more, but he's out there actually doing it, and that's really cool to see. So that's my first shout out. I'm going to pull up another one. I'm trying to find a second shout out, but you go ahead while I do that.
Sure. Let me do a couple rapid fire. First, in response to what you're talking about, there's a great Unreal Engine plugin called Promethean AI. Comes from a guy named Andrew Maximov, who I met at Total Chaos over in Sofia, Bulgaria back in 2019. Promethean AI is an AI system that allows you to just tell Unreal Engine to make a bedroom of a kid from the 80s who loves, you know, XYZ, and blah, there's an option for that. If you go to the Promethean AI website, there's things like how to build Stranger Things in 15 minutes, and some VR experiences and just all sorts of cool stuff. So check that out. I also want to give a quick shout out to Jonathan Winbrush, who I got to meet at UnrealFest, really excellent Unreal Engine educator. And he right now is doing a series called Unreal Engine 5 in 5 days. And it is an absolutely excellent, like, getting started with Unreal Engine day 1 through 5 just breaking down some of the key things that really anyone might be interested in knowing, and kind of like the tips that Jacob and I were talking about earlier from Chris Murphy. Even if you already do know Unreal Engine, I bet if you watch a little bit of Jonathan's series here, you're going to see things that you had no idea were even great. So never a bad idea to go back to the fundamentals and just see if there's anything you've missed in building up the foundation of your knowledge in Unreal.
For sure. Cool. I found my second shout out here. So there's been another really awesome project by this guy on Twitter at Scotty Fox TTV. And he's been doing Stable Diffusion VR. So he's been generating 360 mapped images in Stable Diffusion. And he also has a few experiments where he does live diffusion. So you'll be looking around and it will be actively reprocessing your viewpoint. And it's an acid trip is what it is. Like it's nuts. Everything's warping and kind of re-result. It's really so cool. I would definitely recommend you check out his profile. Because it's just fascinating to see, and it's just a huge potential for like just the ability to even prototype a virtual space, in the sense where you have just a rough idea, you want to get some ideas. Like if you could just snap through like a dozen spaces, get an idea for a theme or a layout, like I think that would be an incredible tool.
That's super cool.
Awesome.
A couple more. Let me give a shout out to William Fauché, who really needs no introduction. He's been a skyrocketing rock star in the Unreal Engine community, but it's been a while since he released a video, and now I know why, because a couple days ago he came out with one called Capturing Lofoten in Unreal Engine 5. This is a photogrammetry reality capture walkthrough of a very in-depth project he did, actually flying over to I'm trying to remember where he actually went. Maybe it was like Iceland or something like that. And scanning, or by scanning, I mean taking like hundreds and hundreds of raw high-res pictures of a couple different places. And what I love about this video too is he goes through all the mistakes he made, like not having enough SD cards, trying to capture something that was too reflective, realizing that it was too cloudy, or not too cloudy, too sunny, and there were too many shadows to do what he originally wanted to do. So you really get to see his whole process, and the result is still a stunning piece of Unreal Engine cinematography, but it's very cool to understand that it's quite different from what he was originally planning, and that there are all these different steps along the way that he had to go through in order to get that final result. So I really appreciate detailed walkthroughs like that. Again, that's called Capturing Lofoten in Unreal Engine 5.
Awesome. How do you spell that word you're saying in the middle?
Lofoten.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll have it in the description on YouTube. And depending on where you're listening, you could probably find some of that stuff there. For those of you who do listen on a podcast platform, I recommend, if you want to run through these shout outs, you go to YouTube. YouTube just has the description section is much more conducive for more detail like this. So definitely check it out. And while you're there, subscribe.
Yeah, do that.
Why not? It doesn't hurt. Awesome. Well, this has been quite the recap. I'm sure there's more that we've just completely forgotten to talk about.
Yeah.
So many cool features in 5.1 that I didn't even know existed. So many cool things I'm excited for. But,
yeah,
that's all we can cover in an hour and 13 minutes, apparently.
I know. I'll give a shout out to a few things I hope we can cover in the next episode. One is the complete overhaul of media in Unreal Engine 5.1.
Yeah.
So much easier to deal with videos now. I think that's worth diving into a little more. I also want to talk a little bit more about the looking glass and what a really cool device this is for Unreal Engine 5. My Unreal Engine, or my UnrealFest talk, will hopefully be out by the next time we do an episode. So I'd love to be able to point people to that. It will be on the Unreal Engine YouTube channel. Also this week, I managed to procure an RTX 4090 and an RTX A6000. I thought it was going to be an RTX 6000 with the Ada Lovelace architecture. It's a regular RTX A6000.
Oh, I didn't know
And I'm
that.
going to be installing both of those in my office in New York City. and running a bunch of tests in Unreal Engine and VR. So I'm sure we'll have something fun to talk about there.
Yeah, you're just gonna hear me being salty because I want one. Awesome. Yeah,
you can come to my office, Jacob.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like I kind of need to. I got to try out all this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, folks, we will catch you on the next episode. Until then, like, subscribe, rate, whatever it is. It really, we appreciate it. We apologize. There's been such a wide gap between episodes. This thing is hard. We didn't realize how hard it was to keep on a production schedule. But hopefully in the coming weeks, we can kind of get back to a more normal schedule, at least until like another conference, right? Like, I don't know if you're going to CES or any of these others, but
I might. I mean, a preview. I can't say anything, but I might be at CES because of something new on the way that
cool.
I might be a part of.
Oh man. Oh, is that the back room talk? Oh, no, that's speculation, by the way. I don't know. I don't know.
I hear you.
Anyways.
Yeah. And, and also those of us who are watching us or listening might notice that we're doing kind of a different platform every week. We've tried, StreamYard and Zoom and all sorts of different things. We did our Azure Connect episode as well. And what we are going to be doing soon, hopefully by our next episode, is using a really cool studio setup from Light Twist. And there was like a little screenshot of our last tests with that in my UnrealFest talk. But I think that's going to be really exciting. And we're already very grateful for everyone over at Light Twist who's been helping us get up and running with that. So looking forward to showing that off more.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we'll catch you guys next time.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.